Well, hey there. So I am working on a new video that'll be out probably like next week. It's gonna be a longer video and it's all gonna be about my experience and my take on ayahuasca. But just to give you like a quick, 5 to 7 second explanation of what it is. If you haven't heard of it, is this, I don't wanna lead with the word psychedelic because you might go into this whole other mindset of what ayahuasca is. While other things that are psychedelic like LSD and mushrooms and even things like peyote, whatnot, those are all very different experiences. I've never done peyote, but it's the first time for everything, right? Ayahuasca, I would say, is like the grandmother of all psychedelic medicines. And yes, I'm saying medicine and not drug because ayahuasca is definitely not a drug. The distinction is, when I think about this, ayahuasca is not, like when I think of a drug, like illegal drugs, or we think of drugs, in that terminology, it's something to escape, it's something that's not good for us, it's something that's potentially fun, feels better than reality, all these different things. And none of that is true about ayahuasca. Ayahuasca does not feel better than being sober. Ayahuasca could potentially be the worst fucking night of your life. It's definitely not something to do casually. And one of the elements of doing ayahuasca is the ayahuasca diet. I know when I was starting to look into doing ayahuasca and I was then committed to doing it, I became very obsessive about the ayahuasca diet. Maybe overly concerned about it. Not that it's not important, and I will say this outright, that if you're going to a retreat or you're going somewhere that has a recommended diet, follow that diet. Follow whatever they tell you to do. It may vary from place to place. You might even find if you Google ayahuasca diet, you're gonna see all sorts of different answers and explanations. In terms of what you can eat, what you can't eat, how long you need to be on the diet before doing ayahuasca, what the purpose of it is. There's so much different information. And to be honest with you, when I got to Peru, the guy who ran our retreat, who's been very involved, with ayahuasca for years, and the Ayahuasca Foundation, that's where I went. It's probably one of the best options in Peru for a legitimate, safe experience doing ayahuasca in a way that doesn't make you feel like some sort of Western tourist bastardizing someone else's culture. One of the things he explained to me, one of the first things I learned once I got to Peru, was that the ayahuasca diet is, I think it's kind of a concept that maybe got a little bit out of hand, or maybe got confused with some other ideas. So for example, if you've already done a lot of research on the ayahuasca diet, you may have seen a lot of sort of interactions with the idea of an MAOI diet. An MAOI is a type of medicine, there's a lot of antidepressants that are MAOIs, and there's a very, very strict diet if you're going to be on MAOIs, and there's a whole sort of scientific explanation I am not going to get into in this video of why that would also apply to the ayahuasca diet. So what I did, I erred on the side of caution. I took 2 weeks before I went to Peru, and I cut out all, what did I cut out? All fat, all salt, all sugar, all oils. I had no pork, no red meat, I cut out everything. Basically what I was down to was a really clean, pure diet. It was just really like rice, vegetables, fruit, really simple grains, not many, really no spices, like a really, really simple diet. I should also say the ayahuasca diet includes no sex, no masturbation, no alcohol, no weed, no any other drugs, nothing. Basically, you cut out, I would say you cut out anything that's going to distract you from dealing with your shit. And that is the number one reason why the ayahuasca diet is so important. It's not about, if you eat this food, you're going to have this interaction, or if you don't do this, then you're not going to have the full effect. All of that, there might be truth in that. I think all of that leads us down a very obsessive compulsive path when it comes to the ayahuasca diet. I think that there's a lot of truth around the idea that you're eating a really clean diet and you're basically living a really clean life, so that when you do get to, your first ayahuasca ceremony, the purging and the cleaning of your body, which is a lot of vomiting and diarrhea, might not be so traumatic, because it can be pretty rough. So I can tell you this, I adhered to the ayahuasca diet for 2 weeks, strictly to the letter. There was one night, I think, that I ate off the diet, and it was like a week before I left. So there are some people who say you don't really need to start the diet for 72 hours before the first ceremony. Some people say a month. It varies. And some people say, you should really, cut out drinking anything too hot or too cold, not watching any TV or any movies or listening to music, and really just kind of quieting your life down. I see a lot of logic in that. I think at the end of the day, you got to do what's sustainable for you. And my life, up, in the 2 weeks before going to Peru, it was not sustainable for me to not be on my computer because I needed to go to work and be on my computer all day. And I'll also tell you this, that while I was strict with this diet, when I got to Peru, we had 6 ceremonies at my retreat. My first 2 ceremonies, all I did was vomit the whole time. I mean, other powerful things happened, but for the most part, it was like 5.5 hours of me vomiting. So I guess that's to say that I don't necessarily know if there's a strict correlation between how clean you eat before you go to Peru and how extreme the purging is. I mean, particularly the first ceremony, I was just like, what the fuck? Like, I have never thrown up this much. But that being said, I also don't think that ayahuasca and the ayahuasca diet is about minimizing how much you purge, because when it comes to ayahuasca, purging is good. You're not getting sick, you're getting well. And so I needed to do all that vomiting. That was part of my healing, and that was part of what I was there to do. And I was not fighting it, wasn't mad at it, didn't love it, but it got better. But I do still believe that if I had not done all of the preparation up until that point, the adhering to the diet, not turning to all of these other ways that I could numb or distract myself, really accepting the terms and conditions, I really feel like what this did, and this was so important once I fucking got there and realized how hard this was gonna be, was that following the ayahuasca diet, from the foods that you eat to the things that you do or don't do in the time period before you go to your first retreat, all of these things induce surrender. They force you to surrender to the situation and to things you may not want to do or feel or go through initially. You may not want to give up all these foods. You may not want to give up masturbating for 2 weeks. You may not want to give up all of these things that have kept you safe, seemingly, from whatever the reasons are that you're going to do ayahuasca. And I'll tell you that if you don't start to practice exercising that muscle before you get there, I can't say you're gonna have an awful experience, but I can tell you just from my own anecdotal experience that I had trained myself to some extent to give in to the fact that ayahuasca tastes awful. There is nothing worse. I have never tasted anything as awful as ayahuasca. I don't know how to describe it to you, except that I still get the vomit shivers when I think about it. So you have to surrender to that. You gotta surrender to the fact that it is not gonna be necessarily a comfortable or a joyous experience. It could be very painful, it can be very scary, it can be very upsetting, because that's just whatever you're dealing with in that ceremony. And I fully believe that following the ayahuasca diet prepares you to accept these terms and accept this situation and say, okay, I'm not in control here anymore. It's not up to me. I don't get to decide how this is gonna go. And the more you can get into that headspace and that heart space, really, I think the more, I don't wanna say successful or productive, but I felt that ayahuasca night was like a collaborative experience, that we were really working together on healing this stuff and dealing with this stuff. And I would not have been open to that kind of collaboration and to handing over the amount of control that you have to hand over when it's a collaboration and not just you making all the decisions. I would not have been prepared to make that sacrifice if I had not practiced sacrificing in the weeks up to that point. It is less about what you're putting into your body and more about the intentions that you show up with. At the end of the day, if you eat something that's not ayahuasca approved, to get into that headspace of, okay, now it's not gonna work, whatever that means, and now I'm not gonna heal, and it's all because I had this fried chicken, now I'm just gonna suffer forever. I don't think ayahuasca and everything that goes with it, the ceremony, the spiritual element of it, the shamanism, all of that, I don't think it's quite so fickle to punish you for fried chicken. But I think that if your intentions aren't clear and your reasons for being there and your willingness to show up and stay there, if those are not solidified in some way, that's going to affect your experience. And the ayahuasca diet trains you to be in that space. So that's why it's so important. Anyway, I will have another video that's much longer about ayahuasca coming up, and so hopefully I can address more questions you may have, talk about my own experience, my takeaways from it. It's been 1.5 years now since I've gone, and I'll tell you that is probably a healthy time period to start talking about ayahuasca because I know that in some ways I'm still processing that experience. But anyway, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your experience has been with ayahuasca, any concerns you have. And obviously, if this is a subject that you're interested in and you want to hear more about it, you can subscribe, and I will take that as a hint that this is something people are interested in. Anyway, that's all for now, and I will talk to you next time. All right? Thanks. Bye.